In a span of just 24 hours, the United States set off a chain reaction of major disruptions across the global economy. Shifts that are unfolding rapidly and could reshape international power dynamics. It began with rising tensions with the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, followed by a destabilizing hit to the global microchip supply chain. And finally, a surprising signal from one of America's closest allies, indicating a drift away from traditional economic cooperation. This wasn't a slow shift, it was a shockwave, and it's already sending tremors through markets, industries, and diplomatic relations. At the center of it all is India, long considered a critical U.S. partner in the Indo-Pacific region. But that partnership is now under strain as Washington turns up the pressure. Refusing to comply with U.S. demands, India now finds itself on the receiving end of economic punishment. President Trump has slapped tariffs on a wide range of Indian exports from pharmaceuticals and electronics to textiles and diamonds. What might seem like a tactical move to reassert American control could instead push India closer to the very powers the U.S. is trying to contain, China and Russia. For years, India has balanced its relationships, supporting the U.S. on key issues while maintaining strategic autonomy. Now that balance may be tipping. India's decision to continue buying discounted Russian oil despite Western pressure to cut ties with Moscow was a clear act of economic self-interest aimed at containing inflation and fuel costs. But in Washington, it was perceived as betrayal. Trump's response, retaliation through tariffs. The problem, this strategy could backfire catastrophically. India isn't just another trade partner, it's the pharmacy of the world. The U.S. depends on it for over a fifth of its generic medications, including essential drugs used in cancer treatment, diabetes care, and infection control. These medicines keep hospitals running, pharmacies stocked, and millions of Americans alive. Raising tariffs by 50% on Indian pharmaceuticals wouldn't just raise prices, it would break the system. Hospitals already strained by staffing shortages and rising costs could be pushed into crisis. Pharmacies would face empty shelves. Patients would delay surgeries, ration insulin, or skip treatments not by choice, but out of necessity. The U.S. doesn't have the infrastructure to fill the gap. Building domestic pharmaceutical capacity would take years and billions of dollars. India's system already exists, efficient, affordable, and reliable. If that pipeline is cut, even temporarily, the American healthcare system could begin to unravel. And it's not just medicine. India is deeply embedded in multiple sectors of the U.S. economy. It supplies IT services that keep companies operating, electronics that power devices, and textiles used in everything from fashion to furniture. Raising tariffs across these sectors would ripple through supply chains, raise costs for businesses, and hit consumers already struggling with inflation. Economically, it's a self-inflicted wound. Strategically, it's a geopolitical gamble. India has long been positioned as a counterweight to China and U.S. foreign policy. Alienating it now could have the opposite effect, driving India closer into Beijing's sphere of influence and strengthening the very BRICS alliance that Washington views as a challenge to Western dominance. That alliance already gaining momentum with the inclusion of new members and plans to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar could accelerate efforts to establish a parallel global financial system. India, which had previously signaled continued support for the dollar, might now reconsider. Meanwhile, another front has opened: microchips. Trump has demanded that major global chip makers bring their production facilities back to the U.S. But instead of achieving tech independence, the plan is creating resistance. Nations like South Korea and Taiwan, key players in the semiconductor ecosystem, are exploring options elsewhere. China, seizing the moment, is racing to build up its own chip capabilities, gaining ground as the U.S. isolates itself. This isn't just a supply chain issue. Chips are the backbone of the modern economy. Every car, smartphone, aircraft, and missile relies on them. Any misstep here threatens to erode U.S. tech leadership and hand over leverage to competitors. Trump's stance isn't just about India or chips, he's turning his focus toward Brazil next. He's previously accused Brazil of manipulating its currency and imposed limits on steel imports. Now, Brazil's growing ties with China and its participation in BRICS financial projects have put it back in the crosshairs. But this move could once again hurt the U.S. more than it helps. Brazil is one of America's top food suppliers, providing everything from soybeans and coffee to beef and poultry. Tariffs here wouldn't just harm Brazil's economy. They drive up prices for American families, hurt farmers in both countries, and spark instability in the global foods What we're seeing is a strategy driven by confrontation and short-term wins, one that threatens to unravel decades of alliances, destabilize critical supply chains, and push emerging powers into tighter coordination against the US. It's not just about tariffs. It's not just about trade. It's about the future of global influence and whether the US continues to lead or watches that leadership slip away. One by one, doors are closing. Rivals are finding new openings. The shock of these 24 hours is not just in what happened, but in what it signals. A rapidly shifting world where the old rules may no longer apply and where America's place in it is no longer guaranteed. The consequences would ripple through agriculture and directly into the pockets of ordinary Americans, even as global attention remains fixed on the growing influence of China and Russia. Donald Trump has already proposed slapping a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports, a sweeping measure that would impact hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods from electronics and clothing to everyday household items. The result, prices would surge across the board. American companies like Apple and Tesla, which depend on Chinese manufacturing, would face massive disruptions. China, of course, wouldn't stay silent. It would retaliate, triggering a renewed cycle of tariffs, economic friction, and global uncertainty, one that could hurt American companies overseas and further fracture already fragile international trade relationships. Trump presents these moves as protective, designed to save American jobs and restore fairness. But in reality, tariffs do the opposite. They increase business costs, raise consumer prices, and strain supply chains. And those hit hardest are the very people Trump claims to defend. While American families feel the pressure of rising costs, something far more consequential is unfolding on the world stage. Something that could redefine global power for decades to come. The world's energy system is undergoing a transformation, and the United States is at risk of being sidelined. Trump's sanctions on Russia were meant to isolate Moscow, but instead they drove Russia straight into the arms of China. In a strategic pivot, Russia has begun supplying natural gas directly to China through the massive Power of Siberia pipeline, with a second pipeline, Power of Siberia 2, already under construction to double that flow. These infrastructure megaprojects are not just about gas. They are redrawing the entire energy map of Eurasia. Once dependent on European markets, Russia is now rerouting its oil and gas to China, which is more than willing to buy and at discounted. Due to Western sanctions, Russia has been forced to sell its resources at lower prices, and China is capitalizing. As global energy prices rise, Beijing is securing long-term contracts for cheap Russian oil, gaining a powerful economic edge. This isn't just trade, it's the foundation of a new energy alliance. Every barrel of Russian oil now fueling Chinese industry chips away at America's leverage in global energy markets. Every cubic meter of gas strengthens China's manufacturing base, its national grid, and even its military capabilities. Meanwhile, American consumers face higher costs at home, and Washington's influence continues to double yen. What's forming is a formidable Russia-China energy axis, one that prioritizes independence from the West and could shape the global balance of power for generations. But energy is only the first front in this new global realignment. The next battlefield is technology. And once again, Trump is charging into it with high-stakes proposals. This time, the target is semiconductors, the microscopic chips that power everything from smartphones to supercomputers and fighter jets. Trump wants companies like TSMC and Samsung to relocate their production facilities to the US, and is proposing 100% tariffs on chips not made on American soil. On paper, it sounds like a strong move. In practice, it's a logistical and economic nightmare. TSMC's Arizona plant is already plagued by delays, budget overruns, and labor shortages. Samsung is facing similar hurdles in Texas. These companies are optimized for Asia, where dense supply chains, skilled labor, and robust government support enable unmatched efficiency. The US simply doesn't offer the same environment. While America struggles to relocate chip production, China is moving in the opposite direction, fast and effectively. In the first half of 2025 alone, Chinese tech firms have expanded aggressively, acquiring semiconductor assets, building new plants, and launching state-up-supported initiatives aimed at replacing foreign technology. Every US export ban and trade restriction only sharpens China's resolve. Instead of being deterred, Beijing is accelerating. The progress is tangible. SMIC, China's leading chip maker, has already begun producing 5-nanometer chips, something many believed was impossible without access to American technology. But that belief is quickly being dismantled. If this momentum continues, China could not only match the US in advanced sectors like AI and military tech, it could surpass it. Trump aimed to protect America's technological edge, but his confrontational approach may be delivering the opposite, giving China both the incentive and the justification to achieve full independence from Western tech. At the same time, while Washington focuses its energy on countering the BRICS bloc, another tectonic shift is occurring. This time involving one of America's most loyal allies, Japan, long seen as a cornerstone of the US strategic presence in Asia, is beginning to forge its own path. In a move that surprised many in Washington, Tokyo has just signed a major deal with India. Ironically, a BRICS nation the US is actively trying to sideline, but that's just the beginning. Japan is also expanding energy and technology cooperation with Brazil and building deeper relationships across the global south. It's a clear sign of growing autonomy. Tokyo is no longer waiting for Washington's green light to act. More striking still, Japan refuses to decouple from China. Despite rising geopolitical tensions, Japanese corporations are intensifying their partnerships with Chinese firms, particularly in electric vehicles and green technology, two industries that are central to the future. And in a move that could send shockwaves through US financial markets. The Bank of Japan has begun discussions about reducing its holdings of US Treasury bonds. The implication is clear. Faith in American economic stability is starting to erode even among its closest allies. This shift is profound. If Japan, the very foundation of US influence in Asia, begins stepping away, it raises uncomfortable questions about the durability of American power. The global order is in flux. Allies are hedging their bets. Rivals are gaining ground. As the US pursues aggressive economic policies and nationalistic trade strategies, much of the rest of the world is adapting, forming new partnerships, writing new rules, and carving out new spheres of influence. So the real question isn't whether Trump's ideas are bold or provocative. It's whether America can afford to continue alienating partners, disrupting global systems, and losing ground in arenas where others are steadily gaining. In this new era of shifting alliances and rising competitors, the cost of miscalculation could be far greater than any tariff.